Okay, I'm going to turn this over to my partner, Becky Petrillo. Becky?
Good morning, and thank you all for joining our DE&I presentation this morning. We have Monica Khetarpal, who is a principal in the Chicago office of Jackson Lewis, and she is an experienced litigator and advisor, providing skilled advocacy and thoughtful advice training and strategic planning for her clients. Monica has significant experience in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. She earned a certificate in diversity and inclusion in 2020 and teaching and learning in the diverse classroom in 2022, both of those from Cornell University. Her practice area includes a variety of services designed to assist her clients in creating a diverse and inclusive environment. So we are very excited to have her here today to talk to us about DE&I best practices. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Monica. Oh, you're on mute, Monica.
Oh, thanks for that assist. It's always something. You think 2 years into this would, be seamless, but not at all. Every single time I do this, there's something. So that was relatively minor. So here's our agenda today. We're going to talk about what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and give a little bit of, meat to the bones of those definitions. We're going to talk about why it's important, and then we're going to apply it to your workspaces and talk about best practices with DEI and give you some concrete solutions and takeaways that you can really apply to your workforce. As Becky said, I'm a lawyer. I practice at Jackson Lewis. We are 1,000 attorneys strong and only practicing employment law, labor and employment, only from the management perspective. So obviously there's a lot to unpack there. We do a lot of things, everything from, immigration to labor to lots of litigation. And I do plenty of litigation too. And that's sort of maybe why I think you should listen to a lawyer about this topic. I've been litigating, harassment, discrimination, accommodation, you name it, claims for 18 years. And what I can tell you is that, probably something you already know, most of those claims, it's not black and white. It's not like somebody did something horrible and here we are in a lawsuit. It's often something in the middle. I see situations where there's a miscommunication, where somebody makes somebody feel like they were discriminated against or harassed, but that wasn't necessarily their intent. And I think this is where the understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion can really come in to smooth those communication wrinkles and prevent problems before they ever come up. So let's start with definitions. What is DE&I? So it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is defined as the numbers, who you are in your workforce, how many people are from each different social identity. It's about recruiting. Who are you bringing in? What are their demographics like? It's about promotion and retention. Who's leaving? Who's being promoted? Are there differences there? What do the numbers look like? It's about compliance, right? We have all sorts of laws now, especially in Illinois, increasingly about, transparency about who you have and what claims they're filing and whatnot. More colloquially, we say it's being asked to the dance. It's being asked to show up. That's what diversity is. And from a legal perspective, we worry about, social categories called protected characteristics. These are things you all know. You're all in HR. Age, gender, ethnicity, race, appearance, disability. The law recognizes that these are historically problematic. And so we pay particular attention to counting those numbers. But I want to encourage you to look a little bit underneath the tip of the iceberg at all the other social identities that may be important to diversity. Whether or not you count it, you can, keep it in the back of your mind. But counting it is also important. How many people of different genders do you have in senior in senior leadership roles. You know, how many people with different parental statuses do you have in your workforce, and how does that impact who they are and what they bring to work? I want you to think sort of broadly about diversity when you count and measure and recruit by these categories. So the next definition here is equity. The definition of equity is giving everyone the tools to reach their potential. You may have seen this graphic in the past. It shows, you know, 3 individuals of varying abilities due to their height. And there's a difference between equity and equality. Equality means giving everybody the same thing, right? They all get the same size box. But equity means giving everybody what they need in order to achieve their full potential. So it doesn't mean you're giving people, you know, a leg up or an unfair advantage. It just means that certain people need a little bit of a boost, in this case, literally a boost, to reach their full potential. And we're going to unpack this a little bit also. And the third definition is inclusion. This is how you value people. This is the process, not the who, not the, you know, how many, but the who. It's removing hidden barriers and interrupting implicit biases, unconscious biases, which is a whole different program on it all of itself. And it's using diversity to leverage a competitive advantage. And we're going to talk a little bit about how, when you get to inclusion, you actually do see competitive advantages. It's about retaining your employees, not just how you're bringing them in, but how are you keeping them, and how are they being successful? And it's about making people count. So more colloquially, it's not about being asked to the dance, it's about being asked to dance, right? That's a good way to think of it. Or, you know, it's about being in the room where it happens, right? Not to infringe on any copyright violations or anything, but I think you guys get the point. And here's a helpful graphic about how to think about it. This is actually published, not my idea. It's published by the Journal of Management in 2001. And what it is on the top axis, you have feelings of belongingness. Do I feel like I'm part of this organization? Do I feel like I'm included? And on the left, you have feelings of uniqueness. So the top left would be exclusion. This is the worst of both possible worlds. You just feel like an outsider, and you feel like you can't be yourself when you're at work. Top right is high belongingness, but low inclusion. So that's what we call assimilation. So we love that you're here, you know, but please, you know, don't really talk about things that make you different. Don't talk about the holidays that you celebrate that aren't like everybody else. You know, we don't want to hear about, you know, how you had to deal with your kids over the weekend because you're a single mom. We want to gloss over all of that, but we do want to bring you into the fold. This is sort of the model minority picture. On the bottom left, you have differentiation. This is what you maybe see in marketing materials, where you have like the 5 minority employees on the cover of the marketing materials, but it doesn't actually reflect the true makeup of the organization. So we really value the fact that you're unique. We love that you look different. This is great. We're going to promote you. You're going to be front and center, but we're not going to ask you to the dance, or we're not going to ask you to dance. We're not going to ask you to sit at the table. We're not going to, you know, make you feel like you belong in part of this group. What you want is true inclusion, where somebody feels like they belong and that they can also be themselves in the workplace, that they're valued for who they really are, that they don't have to shove down parts of their identities. So just to put this into some concrete terms, right? Like we had the marketing materials, but I've had people tell me, you know, for example, and you know, in my family's from India, so I've shown up with, you know, henna on my hands at work, and people are like, "Oh, what's that on your hands?" It makes you feel like the unique parts of you don't belong there, that you have to, you know, kind of close your hands and not show that at work because it makes you feel different. I had a Black employee once tell me that he felt like he couldn't discuss, You know, when somebody said, hey, what'd you do over the weekend? Couldn't talk about the concert he went to because he felt like if somebody knew that he was listening to that type of music, they would make assumptions about him. You know, if he was listening to rap music, that he was, you know, a thug or something like that. These are his words. He was worried about how he would come across. So he had to hold back that part of his identity. These are the things that are obstacles to inclusion that we need to interrupt if we're going to build an inclusive work environment. So you might ask, why is this so important, diversity, equity, and inclusion? I love practicing in this area. Like I said, I'm a litigator at heart. It's what I've mostly done in my career, but increasingly, probably about a third, if not more, of my practice is in the area of DEI counseling. And I love it because it's the intersection of what's right and what makes business sense. You're not making a compromise here. They go hand in hand. It's obviously right? We want to give everybody a chance. We want to make sure that they have the opportunity to live up to their full potential. We don't want to discriminate against people based on characteristics that have absolutely nothing to do with their work product. But so it's right, but it's also actually the right business decision. So there are lots of studies that say that diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforces are literally smarter. They have fewer blind spots. They make more money. They are more innovative. Their employees are better engaged. They're more productive, and they lose less employees. And of course, it's expensive when you lose employees. This isn't just conjecture. These are things that are demonstrated in the research. So members of diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforces exert more discretionary effort. So their members go, their employees go the extra mile, even when they don't quite have to. They're more committed to the organization and to their groups. They collaborate more, and they're more productive. These are all things as HR professionals that you want to encourage in your employee population. And promoting DEI is the #1 way to do it. So here's, I just want to drill home that point by pointing to a couple studies. This one's from 2015 and was reported in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. So the study's participants were asked to estimate prices for simulated stocks. So they gave background information about the company and they said, how much do you think the stocks are worth? In reality, it was real stocks that they were valuing. The researchers collected each individual participant's guesses as to the value of the stock. And then to see how committed they were to those valuations, they let the participants buy and sell the stock with one another, different stocks, different companies. So they could horse trade a little bit. And they could discuss with one another and make their case. Why do you think your stock is worth as much as you think it is? And the researchers ran this game with two groups, a homogeneous group and a diverse group. The participants in the diverse group were 58% more accurate in their assessment of how much the stock was worth. So the prices that they chose were closer to the true value of the stock of those companies. So why did this happen? In homogeneous groups, when you're surrounded by people who are like you, however you break that down, people are more likely to copy one another, even if that means in the wrong direction, because they trust one another, because there's something called an affinity bias. We are inherently, naturally biased towards people who are like us. This is one of the unconscious biases that you might have learned about in unconscious bias training. So if one person makes a mistake, that mistake spreads through the group of participants because they put too much trust in one another. They're sort of mindlessly imitating each other. Diverse groups have more what we call cognitive friction. So people feel more free to disagree. And that discourse actually results in better analysis, enhanced deliberation, and a more accurate result. So this isn't about one race or gender or anything being, smarter or better. It's literally the fact that it was a diverse group that created more accuracy. And notably, they didn't just run this once. This was actually replicated around the country and around the world. Here's another one that was reported by catalyst.org. In this study, they looked at corporate performance. So the study looked at every company that appeared on the Fortune 500 list at least once during a 4-year period. And then they analyzed the financial data from the S&P database, and they looked at the diversity numbers too. They only used companies that had, 4 years of gender diversity reported for their board and also financial performance. So they wanted both data sets. In the end, there were 353 companies. And the findings showed that companies with the highest representation of women in top management had better financial performance than companies with the lowest female representation. So in each of the 5 industries analyzed, so they broke it down by industries, the companies with, they had higher ROI, that if they had more women in those top roles. They also looked at, sales and return on equity. So why did this happen? It's not because women are just better at this. It's the fact that if they have more women on there, they have more diversity in their boards, in their leadership positions. I'm certain that none of these organizations had primarily women. None of them had all women in their C-suite. So it's the fact that there was diversity that caused that, allowed for that cognitive friction that increased actual performance. And this is the psychological sort of mechanics behind it. There's a concept called the diversity value proposition. And so it comes from another concept called collective information sampling bias. That means that information that's held by more members of a team are more likely to be considered correct. So going back to that stock market study, if you're in a room and most of the people are valuing the stock at $100, but you think it's worth $20, question is, how willing are you to speak up? So if the team is homogenous, if most people think it's $100 and they're all the same, they're less likely to speak up. And if you're a minority in that group, however you want to define minority in that particular demographic, those ideas tend to be voiced less often. And when they are, groups tend to spend less time discussing them. Why? Because we want validation. We actually don't like to be disagreed with or disproved, so we don't speak up when we have something different to say. We're worried that we're going to be judged or embarrassed if we're wrong about it being $20 instead of $10. So the diversity value proposition leads to what we call psychological safety. So this isn't a concept of, literal safety. It's more that people feel safe expressing divergent opinions in a group. They feel part of a group. They feel that they're more accepted. They feel more included. And so they don't waste time and energy thinking, should I say it? Should I say I think that it's $20? What if I'm wrong? What will people think? Will they think I'm dumb? They spend less time worrying about being wrong. They feel included. But if minority opinions don't get expressed because people don't feel safe doing it, then you lose the value of diversity, right? So you started with diversity, the numbers, but unless you have inclusion, the feelings of inclusion and the feeling of psychological safety, you don't get the benefit of the diversity because you don't get the cognitive dissonance there, you don't get the friction, and then you don't get critical thinking. And that's why diverse organizations have to be inclusive organizations to really tap the benefits of all of this. So how are you going to get there? What are the best practices? Specific for diversity, we're going to take this one at a time. So diversity best practices, inclusion best practices, and equity best practices. So with respect to diversity, you should take stock of your demographics. Some of the things that you can do are, obviously you might or might not have voluntary self-identification of, various social identities. That would be a start. If you do it at the applicant stage, you want to segregate that information from the people who are making the decisions, but you can still gather it so that you can track who is applying and who is making it through. You can create pipeline programs for where you're getting your applicants, and you can make strategic hiring decisions. So you can have soft targets, to increase, we want to increase minority, we want to increase underrepresented groups in our workforce this year, and have that as a goal. You can recruit strategically from schools that have larger minority populations, for example, from historically Black universities, or from places like University of Illinois at Chicago that has a majority minority population, as do city colleges of Chicago. And then you can make efforts at retention. You can do things like mentoring programs, which increase retention of minority populations. And in that way, you can track and maintain your numbers to make sure that you have the right people in place that reflect the available pool within your workforce for your sort of labor market. So what about equity? How are we going to work with equity best practices? So remember I had that little cartoon earlier. Here's a variation of it. So why do some groups need a boost? Well, on the one hand, we've got equality, where they're different heights, they have different abilities, but they're all being given the same. Then we have equity, where they're still, they're different heights and they're given a boost according to their needs, but there's something lacking in that graphic. It's the reality of two things. First, it's not always a person's fault that they have, that they need that boost. And second, the deck is sometimes stacked against them. So we know that in the world, in America, everywhere, certain groups have a boost, right? They have privilege. And we're going to talk about this concept of privilege. And it's not just racial privilege. There's all sorts of privileges, which you'll see in the video I'm about to play. But those privileges really do give people boosts. And the lack of privilege can dip them below so that they start behind, the starting line. They have more obstacles in their way to achieve the same result. There's also something called stereotype threat. This means that you internalize the stereotypes about your social identity. So for example, I'm a woman and I'm a mom. And so there are certain stereotypes about women and moms, that they're not as committed to work, that they're distracted because of their children, that they need time off, they're not going to work long hours, right? And sometimes, and this is again a documented thing, people internalize those stereotypes. So we know that, for example, in STEM classes in college, when the class is composed, as it often is, of mostly men, those women tend to perform poorer if they know that they're being, if they know that their social identity is known to the evaluator. They internalize the fact that, oh, women aren't as good at STEM. If, on the other hand, you anonymize test scores so that the person who is evaluating the test doesn't know that this is a woman or a man, and the students know this going into it, you see less of a difference. Women's test scores improve just because they know that the person that's evaluating them doesn't know who they are. So that's what's the impact of stereotype threat. Imposter syndrome is the same or similar. Imposter syndrome is when you feel like you are inadequate despite objective evidence to the contrary. So I'll give you, again, an example from my own life. One of my subspecialties is in higher education. I started our higher education practice group 8 years ago, and I'm a litigator, and I do crisis management, and I do DEI. One thing I don't do is Title IX, sexual misconduct claims, and that's such a big part of higher education. And I will tell you that I felt like, do I really belong in this role? Should I have been given this leadership role? I don't know enough about, everything. But the reality is nobody knows everything. Nobody knows Title IX and, tenure disputes. Nobody knows across the board. Nobody's an expert in everything. And I was chosen for my leadership skills. That's what they wanted me to do, was build a practice group. But it took me years to overcome that. And just that imposter syndrome can be a really big barrier for people to, put up their hands and say, I'll take on that opportunity. I'll try. I will, I'll stick my neck out so that maybe I can move to the next level. Imposter syndrome pulls us back from that, that possibility. Also, there are literal differing abilities, and the workplace and the world is only just now catching up with things like neurological differences and learning differences. That doesn't mean that somebody can't do the job, but that they have to do it differently, and we need to give them space to do that. And that's really what equality and equity are about. And there are personal factors that affect the workplace. For example, what's going on in somebody's home life? Is their marriage falling apart? Are their parents seriously ill? What is going on temporarily that maybe they're still a very valuable employee in the long run, but they just need a little boost right now because of factors completely outside their own control. And here's a little video that I think really drives home the point and the importance of this concept of privilege.
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
Ever tried to change your, if you were embarrassed about your clothes or how, if you never think twice about how
I think privilege is when some people have some things and other people don't have things.
I feel privilege is something that you don't even really have control over. I think it'd be silly for me to say I don't have a fair amount of privilege, considering like the country I live in and the job I get to do and the college I was allowed to go to.
I suppose being a white male will help me end up somewhere towards the front, but I'll take a few steps back from being gay.
I don't think I'll make it to the front. I think I'll maybe be in the middle. That's just the gut feeling I have.
If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you are embarrassed about your clothes or house while growing up, take one step back. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If you have ever been bullied or made fun of based on something you can't change, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you came from a supportive family environment, if you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, if you are able to move through the world without fear of, if you took out loans for your education, there were more than 50 books in your house. So these are your final positions.
I think it felt kind of strange for everyone.
It's a hard thing to discuss or even reflect on. It was very awkward. I think when you can represent it so visually like this and so immediately, it definitely takes on a new form.
I think we were like all joking around in the beginning. It was pretty lighthearted, and as soon as the questions started coming in, the mood shifted immediately, and we all it was just silent.
Just looking back and seeing like a bunch of people behind you is not a good feeling.
It's like weird how you want to like hold on to explaining a certain privilege, like, oh, but that's not actually me because like I had to work really hard for that. So it's weird to like take a step forward when you feel like you're taking a step forward with someone else, but you wear a lot of the baggage of like how those things were hard. It was like more emotional than I thought it would be.
It reminded me of when they talk about slavery in high school and you feel like angry for a few days, but then you just realize like this is how it is.
For me, it was kind of frustrating almost to look back and see how much further some people were behind me, and realizing that, a lot of that stuff, no amount of hard work or even legislation can make up that gap.
It's interesting being an Asian American because you're not really sure where you fall on the spectrum of privilege.
I know that for me, one of the reasons I ended up so far back was that there were questions around safety as an African American, as a woman, as a gay woman. There are just so many different ways that I don't feel safe.
I feel like I just learned to be grateful for what you have. We're in such a huge society where it's always complaining about what you don't have. It just shows you that for some families, like each family, you're meant to do better. My grandparents did good. My parents did good, and I'll do even better.
I do think if you're not like aware of privilege, you should do this exercise, but it's more complicated.
All right, so that I think really drives home this concept of privilege and how important it is and how nuanced it is. It can be about, you know, how many books you had in your house growing up. Did you ever worry about where your next meal was coming from? You know, did your parents go to college? All these things factor into your privilege. And because people have different privileges, that's why equity is so important, because we need to level the playing field, right? We need to make sure that everybody's given what they need to reach their full potential. Otherwise, we're the ones that lose. We're the ones that don't see the full benefit of the people that we hire. So I hope that kind of drove it home a little bit. The next one is inclusion best practices. So the reason there's a bunch of Post-it notes on here is because my favorite way to make a more inclusive work meeting is, instead of really concrete suggestion, instead of saying, hey, let's brainstorm about this, what do you all think? And having people raise your hands and give their input, their thoughts, their ideas out loud. You can ask people to put their thoughts and ideas on a Post-it note. And you put those Post-it notes on a board, and you pull those Post-it notes off, and you discuss the ideas one by one. Obviously, you don't have to use a board and a Post-it note. You can just, you know, do submissions via email. But the point is to disaggregate people's social identities from their ideas. It makes people feel more safe to disagree. It makes them feel like they know that they won't be judged for whether they're wrong, because nobody knows who they are. And also all of those unconscious biases that we have about one another, they fall away because you're not making assumptions about somebody that you don't even know. That's one really concrete strategy. Another idea is to use inclusive language. So for example, you would use spouse or partner instead of husband or wife. Not all the time. If you know somebody wants to be referred to, you know, or refer to their husband or wife, that's totally fine. But it's a signal to others that, you know, you respect their different social identities and you're open to understanding who they are and treating them accordingly. So they don't have to hide themselves, their true unique selves at work. When you're organizing a meeting, ask who has to be here to understand the whole situation. It doesn't always mean the people at the top. Quite frankly, I mean, a lot of times it's the people at the bottom. They have unique perspectives, and bringing them to the table makes them feel included. And you're often maybe surprised at what they can offer. They have an entirely different perspective. When somebody says something at a meeting, instead of just launching into your own idea, link to what the other person said. You say, you know what? You brought up a really good point. I really appreciate you saying that. It made me think of this other thing. What you're doing is validating that other person's contribution to the group. You're making them feel included. Everybody makes mistakes. So instead of calling people out and, you know, shaming them or treating them like they made a mistake, we can use this as a teachable moment. So those of you who have kids may be familiar with this growth mindset concept. My kids have had it drilled into their heads since day one. You know, we learn from mistakes. Mistakes aren't an indication that we're wrong or bad or dumb or don't know what we're doing. Mistakes are an opportunity. And so when you create a group dynamic that thinks like that, you know, you're going to see people more likely to stick their neck out, more likely to have innovative ideas. Again, create a sense of psychological safety for all people. Mentor people from different segments of the company or people who don't look like you. Again, there's that affinity bias, and we do have a tendency to, you know, favor, mentor, help, connect with people who are like us. Be really actively conscious about that. We had an associate, she's unfortunately left the firm and went in-house, but she was very much like me. Her family was also from India. I live in Oak Park. She lives in Oak Park. She had young kids. I have like medium-sized kids. They're getting older every day. I noticed the other day my almost 13-year-old is like growing a little mustache, so he's definitely getting older. But I knew I was favoring her. I could feel it, right? When I had an opportunity, a really good new case, a new client I wanted to introduce somebody to, when I had an opportunity to attend a reception where judges or politicians would be there, my first thought was, oh, I should ask her. And because I do what I do, and I'm not perfect, but I was trying to actively interrupt that bias, right? Think about it, acknowledge it. Every single one of us has biases. You cannot get away from that. So what are you doing to interrupt it to create a more inclusive workspace? And encourage other people to participate in whatever DEI opportunities your company offers. So you and HR sit in a really unique role. If you have employee resource groups or you have events associated with, you know, International Women's Day or Black History Month or anything like that, get out there, talk to people one-on-one. Hey, are you interested in going? And make sure that you're marketing it in a way where people get real deliverables from that. Not let's just, you know, hey, let's just go just to go. What am I going to learn? Why should I go? How am I going to make the people who come from that, you know, that social identity group feel like their social identity is valued and we're not just checking a box when we set up this programming? And you can set performance goals that support an inclusive environment. So you can include DEI as part of your performance reviews, especially for people who are in management and people who are making hiring decisions. You can have something in there that codifies the importance of DEI to your company so that there's some deliverables that have to be reached, right? And then it motivates people to actually work towards these DEI goals. The next thing you can do to increase inclusion is avoid microaggressions, help avoid microaggressions. What are microaggressions? They're brief everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to certain individuals because of their membership in a particular group. So you have a comment that on its surface may appear neutral, but it's actually disparaging or insulting or just makes the other person feel othered. It makes them feel like an outsider. So the opposite of inclusion. So here's another video I'm going to show you. This is Lily Singh. I love her. She's a comedian. She, like me, is also Indian. A little bit of a theme here. You teach what you know, right? It's funny because almost every single thing in this video has been said to me. It's really interesting. So here we go.
Now don't get your panties all in a bunch. What if everyone's a girl, superwoman? And a lot of people ask me if I've ever suffered any extreme cases of racism. And to be honest, no. I'm fortunate enough to say that I haven't. But since moving to LA, I have definitely had some people say some ridiculous things to me. But here's the thing. I find it effing hilarious. Here are real things that white people have said to me. My dad's name is Sukhwinder.
Winder. That's Wander. I'll just call your dad Sam.
Dad, you're Indian? I loved Slumdog Millionaire.
So your last name's Singh. Are you related to Ranveer Singh?
You know, one of my coworkers is Indian. What a small world.
So I went to like an Indian wedding once, and I wore the full costume and everything.
Your parents must be really strict.
Did they expect you to get married at 23?
I even belly danced to Bollywood music, and I wore that little dot on my forehead.
So why aren't you a doctor or a lawyer?
Are you allowed to have a boyfriend?
I went to Little India once, and I got the best tandoori chicken.
Do you speak Indian at home?
Are you a very strict Hindi?
So is your real name Lily? Stop lying. I've never met a real Indian Lily.
Do you know Priyanka Chopra? She's Indian too, right?
It's so terrible. Everything you see in movies about India.
You probably want something spicy, right?
You know who you look like? Mindy Kaling. You look so exotic. I thought you were from Brazil or something. You know, I've always wanted to visit Delhi.
My friend went to India last year. It changed his life.
So where are your parents from?
They're from Punjab.
Oh, that's in the Middle East, right?
I will take the veggie burger, please.
That's because you're Islam?
Do you have to get an arranged marriage?
Did you experience like a lot of racism growing up?
So you're not allowed to have sex before marriage, right? That's crazy.
Here's the thing though, right? I don't believe that every person who says something ignorant is trying to offend me. I think maybe they just don't know any better and no one has schooled them. So this is my attempt to make you understand. Here's what the reverse would sound like. If I spoke to white people, how they spoke to me.
Yeah, my dad's name is Peter.
Batad? Batad. I'll just call him Brubjot. Wait, are you white? Oh my God, I love Taylor Swift. Wait, Smith? Are you related to Derek Smith? He's also from America. Oh my God. The girl who served me a latte at Starbucks this morning was also white. I went to a white wedding once. Beautiful, but it was so short. And your family, they're so tiny. You probably tell your mom to shut up all the time. I even did the chicken dance and wore a tie around my forehead. So close. Wait, so you're not a country singer? Are you allowed to be a virgin? Oh, I went to Burger King once, and I loved it. Wait, so do you speak fluent American at home? Or British? Or Scottish? Are you a strict English? So is your real name Sarah? Yeah. Oh my God, I know like 9 white Sarahs. Wait, do you know Ellen? She's also white. It's so terrible, everything you see in history books about white people. Oh, you probably want something with no flavor, right? You look exactly like Jimmy Fallon. Yeah, like the features, everything. Wow. You look so common. Ooh, I've always wanted to visit Utah. So cool. My friend went to Ohio last year, and he said his life was exactly the same. And you're from Chicago, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's in Europe, right?
It's the steak and potatoes.
Is that because of your Christianity? So will your parents like force you to fall in love, or are you allowed to get arranged? So do you have like a super hard time recognizing your privilege, or are you aware of it now?
Oh, I don't have any privilege.
So you're not. Is it hard to have so many options when you're shopping for foundation? Crap, they don't have any eggnog on the menu. Do you drink anything else? Well, look at your hair. Can I touch it? Do you mind? Wow, that is so soft. Is that natural? Beautiful. Look at his hair. Look at it. Yeah, touch it. So what's the religious symbolism of the hat? Wait, so let me get this straight. You actually turn red in the sun. Like you change color. That's crazy. I watched a documentary about your people called Super Size Me. So sad. So did they like expect you to be pregnant by 16? And there you have it. It's not meant to be offensive or anything.
Aren't you actually related to someone named Revere?
Okay, let's just like.
And didn't your parents actually want you to get married at a really young age?
Shouldn't y'all be doing like the YMCA or something? Get that out of here. Get up my kid. Get up. It's all about one love. Thanks for watching.
So she, it's a little colorful, but hopefully also entertaining. And she frames it in an Indian versus white divide. I think that's for comic relief. It's not that. It's that we all have assumptions about one another's social identities, and we make comments. It doesn't matter, what social identity. It can happen to anyone. Well-intentioned comments. What I like is that she really acknowledges that there's this difference between, intent versus impact. And there's no, with the microaggression, there's no assumption that, this person intended to hurt your feelings or act in, a disparaging way. But because there's a lack of understanding or sensitivity to the other person's, background, that's the impact it has. And they're small and they're subtle, right? It's not like, I'm not really sure you can do this job. It's something, less than that, but it still makes you feel like an outsider. And so what can you do? When you see this happening as a bystander, you can intervene. So those tactics can be interruption, distraction, diversion, or outright intervention. So the other day, I was having an email discussion with a bunch of my colleagues, and I made a suggestion. And then, 3 or 4 emails later, a male colleague made the same, suggestion. And because I'm me and I don't have a lot of, shyness about this, I just responded to all and I said, it's a really good idea. That's why I suggested it 3 emails ago. Please scroll down. But not everybody feels comfortable doing something like that. Sometimes they need somebody else's help. So the reason that there is a bell here is because some corporations actually have this idea they implement where when they have a group discussion, one person has a bell. And whenever they see some sort of microaggression going on, it's their job to ring the bell, to very publicly call it out. So if somebody is interrupting somebody else, they ring the bell. If somebody's not paying attention, staring at their phone, they ring the bell. Body language, right? Crossed arms, rolled eyes, they ring the bell. Taking credit for somebody else's work, ring the bell. That's pretty aggressive. And I think it takes a special type of culture to be able to do that with a bell. But I bring it up because I want to put it in your mind, and maybe you can train your employees too, that being an active bystander doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, create drama like that. You can just simply say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure that she was finished talking. Can we hear her out before you start? Right? Things like that. Or you can just quietly send somebody an email. Hey, maybe you ought to put your phone down because we should pay attention to what he's saying. Things like that. You can be an active bystander by using these techniques. And so what else do you have in your DEI toolbox to increase? I hope at this point, I've convinced you that this is important, that it's good for your organization, that's the right thing to do, and it's the smart business thing to do. So here are some tools that you could use. You can create a voluntary affirmative action program. It has to be guided by counsel. You have to make sure you stay within legal bounds. There are reverse discrimination claims that you need to be aware of and structure it properly. But increasingly, we do see use of voluntary AAP programs. You can do pay equity audits. So this would be an affirmative thing you do, especially as there's increasing reporting requirements within Illinois. People are doing pay equity audits all the time now. They always have been, but we've seen a huge uptick because employers want to know where their vulnerabilities are before it turns into a claim or a lawsuit. So when we do the pay equity audits, we do it under cloak of privilege. There are consulting firms that do it as well, but you really want to do it under counsel. Otherwise, all those emails that say, hey, I found this problem in this division, these women aren't paid enough, that's all discoverable in the lawsuit. That's not what you want. We even have a staff of in-house PhD level statisticians that help with these things. So what we do is we run a statistical analysis and see if there's any trends that need to be addressed. You can create pipelines for recruiting. So develop relationships with those schools, those recruiters that focus on diversity hires. So, for example, for our law firm, we have relationships with law schools where we're more likely to get diverse candidates, right? I have relationships personally with the, career placement people. And so when they send me their top lawyers, they're going to have a higher percentage of diverse lawyers in that group because it's a law school that has more diversity. You can create strategic mentoring programs that cross the barriers between, different socioeconomic groups. And so we can make sure that we're not pairing like with like, so that people get the advantage of, working with people who aren't exactly like them. You can create employee resource groups, also something to be done sort of carefully. In a nutshell, they should not be exclusive. You should allow allies, and they should be treated as any other business unit, meaning they should have a mission statement, they should have, yearly goals, and they should have some accountability to those goals, so that they're not just fluff, but they're actually moving the ball forward for DEI. You can do all sorts of training. So sure, there's unconscious bias training where lots of people are doing. But, we do training specifically on microaggressions. We do training on generational differences in the workforce. The expectations of Gen Z are wildly different from baby boomers. It's not just how they're communicating, whether they want to do it over the phone or in an instant message. It goes far deeper than that, as to what they want to see about social justice from their employer. So training like that is important. When you have problematic individuals, you can do one-on-one training as well. I actually have one right now where I am acting as the DEI coach for somebody for 8 weeks because he is somebody who just cannot be fired. You have these individuals who are acting in problematic ways, but they're just not in a position where you can terminate. And so what do? You can do one-on-one coaching. And then you can do climate surveys. So I do these things, I get called to do these things either proactively, hey, I want to take the temperature of what's going on out there. I want to make sure that there's no latent issues. I want to use this as a proactive DEI tool. Or when it seems like something's bubbling under the surface, but you're not quite sure what. So I keep getting claims from this one department, or I keep getting this type of claim, or, these employees just keep coming into my office complaining about this one manager. No formal claims, but I'm just worried. I don't know what's going on. Or when it's a full-blown crisis situation, it's in the news, and, there's calls for, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, this is what I'm going to do about it. Well, we go in and we use a bunch of different tools. We do written surveys, can do focus groups, we can do one-on-one interviews, we look at the demographics, just go in and, tailor it to the budget and the needs, but just take the temperature of what's going on and then create a strategic plan going forward that, again, isn't just check the box, but is really tailored to what is going on. So even if that is personnel changes, structural changes in terms of the policies and procedures, strategic training, all sorts of things. So those are ways that you can really attack DEI proactively, or, hopefully you never hit a crisis situation, but, read the news, does happen all the time. So with that, I would love to hear from you if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts. I'll take the sharing off so that you can see all of our faces.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask, or if you'd like to put it in the chat, that's great. One question I have, Monica, is if a company uses an aptitude test to see if a person qualifies for a position in the company, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
So there's a lot of different kinds of aptitude testing. If you're talking personality tests, it's probably not a good idea. So a lot of that testing has an unintended adverse impact on minority populations, and picks up on things that aren't necessarily key to the job. And so I would really, I would be very careful, very, very careful on that. You can do skills-based testing that are very closely tailored to the skills of the job. But anything that veers towards personality testing is far more difficult, but it would be a sort of fact-intensive situation.
It's kind of like a skill and aptitude. Yeah, it's like a psychometric testing to, is the person right for this position? Would they fit in,
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever you talk about fit, so women tend to be, for example, less outspoken and less of a personal advocate. And also when they do advocate for themselves or for their groups, they are judged more harshly. And so if one of the things that you're picking up on the aptitude test is, advocacy ability, how are you really getting what you need to get out of that? Are the women's responses going to be candid? Are they going to be accurate? Are they going to reflect what her skill really is in that area? Big questions there. I would want to see some verification of, from the organization that's doing it, that it works, that, it's not just being done, what has been their experience with it, with others. And I'd want to know if they're doing any, background testing to make sure it doesn't have an adverse impact on minority populations. I think you're going to really big risk there. And I think that if the EEOC were to see it, they'd take a hard look. They take a hard look at any testing.
We do have another question. What is best practice for starting an ERG?
So what you want to do is you want to identify a leader for the ERG. And then you want to identify a sponsor. The sponsor would be somebody who is high up in the organization, who gives some heft to this, the endeavor, and make, by their participation, makes it clear how important this is to the organization. And then you probably want to do something like a core group of people. I mean, this all depends on how many people you have, right? And then that core group should be responsible for, in a particular period of time, establishing a mission and then goals for that year. And then what are they going to do? How often are they going to meet? Basically a business plan for it. And then at the end of the year, a report. How'd you do with respect to your business plan? So not unlike any other group, but you definitely want to make it inclusive. So you want to make sure that allies can join as well. And depending on the workforce, I do see sometimes human resources or somebody involved in each ERG, just as a monitor and a stopgap in case you have disruptive behavior. So that there's somebody who is trained to deal with disruptive behavior, like an HR personnel, who can step in the moment and interrupt it if it happens, because you are opening it up to allies, but they should be true allies. Anyone else? All right. Well, it was just a pleasure to talk with you about this. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and it's definitely growing. Probably every day I get a call from one of my partners saying, "Hey, my client needs help with this. Can you help?" It's it's been a lot of late nights recently, but it's really fulfilling work. Far better than litigation. Far better to prevent litigation than defend it. Any follow-up questions? You guys can reach me. Google's a wonderful thing. Even if you can't spell my last name, which is hard, I understand. If you just Google Jackson Lewis, Monica, Chicago, you'll get it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. We really appreciate your presentation and all of your knowledge. This will be available on our website for future viewing, and we will be sending out the slide deck to all participants.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.